Hey everybody, welcome back to another daily drop here on the Heel Report, which is part of Tar Heel 24/7. I am publisher Andrew Jones. He is our director of basketball recruiting and basketball analyst, longtime college AAU and high school coach, Mr. David Sisk. And this is a daily drop topic about the players-only meeting that the Tar Heels had after their lackluster 12-point win over Navy the other night. David has been in locker rooms for 4 decades. And he understands the dynamics of the locker room. And I thought it was important that we specifically hit on this one topic in this discussion, because player meetings, based on my experiences, David, as a journalist, and also even in high school we had them, which is pretty wild to think about. They come in various ways and they're triggered in various ways, but usually it's a losing streak. It's negativity. There's a lot of ugly stuff that kind of leads to it. This is a situation where everything's been great. Everybody loves each other. They're lathering each other up. They're 5-0. They win by 12 points, and yet there's a players-only meeting after Hubert Davis addressed the team. In fact, it took 27 minutes once we got into the players' lounge for players to come out and talk to us. Usually it takes 3 to 5 minutes. So what were your thoughts when you found out that this club got together on their own, sort of initiated by Seth Trimble, a players-only meeting when they're 5-0 and they just won by 12 points?
Well, as far as the meeting goes, not a lot. I've always been one of those. I never felt like players' meetings accomplished a whole lot. And the key is that this is only one they have. They keep having them, you're in trouble. And I've just – It can be a good thing, because I guess the thing I take more out of it than anything is, number one, Seth Trimble called it, who's been there longer than anybody. And so it's kind of, he has ownership of the team. And number two, he is doing this while he's out with an injury. So, he's just not over on the sidelines just biding his time. He's taking ownership of this group, even though he has an injury and he's not playing right now. So those would be the biggest things. I think they know that the way they finished the game against Navy, and really to a degree late in the game against Radford, is not the way that they want to play the season. I think they know that you could see it coming. And I've spoken about this in my last 2 stories. I spoke about it in the story right after the game. I spoke about it in a film review. You could see it when the lead got to 68-44, I believe it was, which was the biggest which was the biggest lead of the game. And the next 2 possessions, they just really haphazard defensively, didn't match up, got lost in communication, just jogged out into the closeouts, just really kind of lost their effort. And the thing is, it didn't stop right there. It carried over. And the next day, North Carolina, you never felt like they were going to lose, but the lead's gone from 24-9. Navy should never go on a 13-0 run against North Carolina. So those were kind of the things that I think that you see that led to that. It's a good thing they understand it, but I just don't put a whole lot into team meetings that they're going to turn the season around. But it is good that I think they know that got their attention. They know what's expected and the way they should play and the way they should not play.
What I found interesting is I asked Jaron Stevenson, in noting that the cohesion we had seen the first 4 regular season games and 2 exhibition games really wasn't very apparent at all during the Navy game. They never really clicked. They did not play. I don't think they had 2 consecutive minutes where they played to the standard, even though there were some theatrical dunks and stuff like that. That really wasn't the standard that they talk about, that's preached to them. And Jaron said that even before the 15-0 run, they probably would have had a team meeting, because there was some finger pointing. There was some this kind of stuff. There was some head shaking. There was Caleb Wilson acknowledged that he was ticked off. He had the dunk that forced a timeout by Navy, and he screamed and then went right to the bench and had his head down the whole time because he was so angry. So do you think that there's part of this is a lot of different guys coming together and they're playing a schedule that's not very challenging other than Kansas? They've been home for a while. It's a lot of so-called patsies you're running in there. So the human nature instinct is to sort of back off some. And some of the guys aren't wired that way, so they're pissed off that other dudes aren't doing what they're doing. And so they're trying to get that on the same page.
I can peel a lot of layers back on this one. I think because number one, I know that was Navy's game plan. They wanted to get forward back on transition defense, make North Carolina walk it up, slow them down, have long possessions, bog them down. And they wanted to frustrate North Carolina, and it clearly worked. The second thing is that North Carolina does not need to get in a situation to where if they're not out on the break of these highlight dunks from Caleb Wilson and running the fast break, that they're going to lose effort if that's not happening. So their effort does not need to be based off emotion. They need to be stoic. If that's the case, that you get in these games where you're grinding it out, where it's methodical and your effort doesn't wane whatsoever. Another big thing, and to me, maybe the biggest thing, because I think these other things could be corrected with the return of Seth Trimble. And right now, you're asking a lot of Caleb Wilson as a freshman to not only be your best player, but to be your spark plug. Yeah. It's like his energy and his plays, his blocked shots, his dunks, his theatrics, like you talked about, all that, charges the crowd up, which charges in return, charges him up and charges the team up. And they feed off each other. Now, what happens if you're against North Carolina Central at 9 o'clock on Friday night at the tip in front of a half-empty crowd, or you're playing Navy Tuesday night, like you said, with a lot of empty seats, and these opponents just don't sell tickets. So you're not in the best basketball environment, and that can happen. But I go back to the Kansas game. If this is a different team without Trimble, and I think we've got to keep an eye out on that. North Carolina with Trimble, North Carolina without Trimble. If North Carolina had not have had him in a Kansas game, I'm not sure how that one would have turned out.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the first half, they're behind. So, against Navy too, North Carolina only had 5 transition points in the first half. They only ended up with like 13 for the game.
13, yeah.
And a lot of those were Caleb Wilson getting a rebound, pushing it one-on-one, dunking the ball. That was the fast break. So against Kansas, they're stuck in neutral. Well, what happens right off the bat? Boom, over the top, Seth Trimble layup. Boom, over the top, Seth Trimble layup. Boom, over the top, Seth Trimble. Kansas gets back. He hits Kyan Evans filling in behind him, three-pointer, and now they're off to the races. And then a couple of plays later, they did it the same thing to the other side, that diagonal skip behind the defense. So he was responsible there for 10 points in transition that set that place on fire and was the demise of Kansas. They don't have that right now. I'm watching them run the fast break, and there's nobody can run the break besides Caleb Wilson. He's like out there on the floor of his dribble. Nobody else is even in the picture because it's not an overly athletic perimeter. They don't have that excitement about them. They don't have that boom in full court. So I think then when that happens, that can impact the energy and affect the energy. So they've got to build off this, but I do think when they get Seth Trimble back, they're going to be a different team. They're losing 14.5 points a game, 2 out of him. They're losing leadership, but he has an it factor and a wow factor because of his athleticism that nobody else except Caleb Wilson has on that team, and I do think it makes a difference.
So how does a meeting among players when they're going to have to play another month or so without Seth, if they're going to try to get something accomplished, what is the accomplishment? Because the guy that is sort of the engine, the guy that calls the timeout, can't go out in the court and lead by example. So how does he get a message across? And also, Jaron said several players spoke up and spoke passionately. So how does Seth get his message into the other guys to take to the court when he can't go take it on the court with them?
I've been here 4 years. I know what the standard is. And I know 2 of those 3 that he's completed so far have been subpar, but he did play a lot on a 1 seed. And so he's seen the good North Carolina.
Yeah.
But no matter win or lose, the standard doesn't change. So he knows what it is. He's been around these guys. He's been the whole staff's North Carolina guys. You've got all these other players dropping in or around all the time. He knows the standard. So he can pass that along to the other players that, hey, this is it. This is what is expected. But also it's about doing your job. Not depending on Caleb Wilson to make a big play, not depending on the crowd to get you charged up. You are responsible for yourself. You are the captain of your ship. Do your job and don't depend on other people, because I think sometimes that may be the case that they're looking at somebody else. Everybody needs to step up.
We're going to do another podcast after this one. We're going to talk more about some of the things we've seen that need to be fixed or some of the processes that this team is going under. Staying on the players only meeting, you said initially that they usually don't amount to a whole lot. Why is that?
Because you're just repeating something you hear every day. I mean, Seth Trimble really, and he'll have it a different angle because it's from the players, from a player rather. So it comes from a different point of view, but it's still pretty much the same message. I don't think he's said anything they've not heard from Hubert Davis. And if the language was really spicy, they've not heard anything they've not heard from Jeff Lebo. So he's not
the only one, by the way. There's a few other cussers on that staff.
Or anything about
It's not the head
Jones if he would have taken up.
Yeah, we were joking in the players' lounge, David, that we were trying to listen. Like, how many times can Hubert say, "What the fudge are you doing?"
Yeah.
Why the fudge weren't you getting back on defense or switching properly? The other coaches would actually complete the word.
Yeah. With one less letter. So and that's the thing. And maybe it's just the coaches that I was around, like I said, really didn't set a great deal into that. So maybe that's the experience I've been around. So there may be other ones that have been involved in coaching that feel totally different. And I respect that. So I'm not saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I wouldn't say that for a second. I know the guys that I was around. I'll tell you this. They put a lot more store into a good fight during practice than they did a locker room meeting. That was just the kind of guys that was when, or the guys could go out and back to the building when it was over, and you knew you had some guys. That's what you wanted. You wanted some fighters and some battlers, and you could make that stuff up in 30 minutes. You kiss and make up, go play ball. But so they put more into that. So I think really a lot of times, I think probably the narrative was, well, it's words. We want actions. And not so. Like I said, people can look at it from different viewpoints, but I think that's basically from the guys that I've been around and I learned from. That was kind of their outlook at it.
Well, this group has been chippy at practice with each other. They've been very open about that, more than most teams I've covered in the past. And they were chippy in the summer in open gym. They've talked very openly about that. Maybe this is a carryover. They can't get chippy in front of Navy, so maybe and there was some bickering going on out there. And maybe this was kind of in season chippy, just getting it out. Maybe it was verbal chippiness together, expressing some accountability, asking for some accountability.
Chippiness. And I don't mind it during the game, to be honest with you. I think it's an emotional game. I think you're going to get some of it. Now, I understand what the North Carolina way is going to be. And these guys played for Dean Smith. And so there's a different, like I said, I go back to the standard. There's a different thing there. Jeff Lebo and I had a great conversation back in the spring, sat and talked for an hour and a half, and never brought up recruiting, never brought any of that up. He just told me stories. And I remember asking him, how did Bill Guthridge and Dean Smith get the respect of the guys that they did without using profanity? Because that just blows my mind that it can be done. I guess that tells you what kind of dinosaur I am. And he talked about how they could do it. And one thing he told me in practice one day, he was really, I can't even remember which player he was talking about, but it was when Lebo played. And he said, Dean gets aggravated about something, and he goes, somebody didn't get back on defense. And he says, Andrew, are you tired? And you knew the response was not to have a response. You did not answer back. You didn't say anything. And the players said yes. And when he said that, Lebo said everybody in the gym froze.
Wow.
And because he spoke back. And he said Dean got about as mad as he could get. And he told Guthridge, he said, go over to the other practice court with him. And he said it was a really rough running session. And he said, even by today, that would be old school standards. And he said, there was never a curse word. There was never anything close to a curse word. But at North Carolina, you didn't respond. You kept your cool. You kept your poise. You played through everything. So,
well, and you knew by him asking that question. I'm sorry. You knew.
No, go ahead.
By him asking that question, he's saying you're not busting your butt. So that was Dean's way of saying you're not busting. You need a bust.
Yeah, yeah. And you were talking about emotion. If you go back to the very last clip in the film review and watch it.
Yep.
The fast break that Navy had with about 2 minutes left when the guy comes down, shoots uncontested three. Brings the ball down. Visar has to back off. Powell's not guarding anybody. You watch Caleb Wilson. You was talking about Caleb Wilson's response, body language. Watch him when they're trying to throw an entry pass. Powell's trying to throw an entry. I believe it was. Powell was trying to throw an entry pass into Caleb Wilson, and the Navy guy he throws it up, and the Navy guy just picks it off and gives it up, and they're off. And soon as Caleb Wilson just drops his head like that, you can see the emotion, and it's 30% jog back. And they're not, and that's, I think, part of it. So you could see the body language. And I see a lot of times the defensive transition, and I'm thinking if these guys were running as hard back on defense as if they ran to the other end of the floor thinking they were going to get a shot, they'd be running a lot harder. You've got to run at that speed. So I could see, I don't know what was said in the huddle. Watching it on television, I didn't see any of the stuff that you're talking about in the locker or on the bench rather. But you could see some of the frustration that guys are going to have to get through and grow up with that happened against Navy.
As a coach, do you think Hubert wants to know what was said, or do you think he's better off not knowing what was said?
I think there's part of you really wants to know. And I think you can act like I don't care. But
how about need to know? I should say need.
Hey man, what was said? Who said what?
How about need to know? No. Does he need to know? I should have used need, not want. Does the coach need to know? Sometimes should that stay with players?
Yeah, and I don't think it hurt. It kind of helps you know. But you also say, if you have a player that said, hey, this doesn't get out of that locker room, what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room, this is between us, you don't want to violate that trust. So
they were talking. I mean, Henry outlined what it was. He said selfish play, not switching, not communicating. So they were pretty open about it. So I'm sure will know. But I have always found it interesting. I know that total sidebar here, and we're about to get out, but a couple of years ago after a terrible loss at home to Notre Dame in football, there was a players-only meeting, and Max said he didn't want to know what was said in there.
Right.
He said because they kind of need to figure it out without us holding their hand. And being early in the season, maybe it's good for Hubert that they're holding a meeting on November 18th when they're 5-0 after a win, because they recognize what they can be, and they see how serious not playing at that level, that standard is, and how that can very quickly become a bad habit, which we'll talk about some of that in the other podcast, about how some things can become habit very quickly once the season starts. Everything always goes in a slightly different direction than anticipated.
Right. Well, I think if Hubert and coaches know that what the players are saying was pretty well resonating, repeating what has come from them, then that's good.
Yeah.
Sure. I feel that. I feel like it can give you a good feeling about it. You don't want, if it's something where they're just trashing each other and trashing the coaching staff and this stuff doesn't work, and then that's a whole different scenario. But I think too, I think a coach, if you know that they are going to kind of repeat and they've got the company line and they're saying the right things, and there's somebody speaks up and he understands what the big picture is, you kind of like some confirmation on that, just to know that you're on the same page.
That's that little moment in Hoosiers when Hackman walks out of the room and one of the players kind of reiterates what he was saying and kind of gets everybody on the same page there. Player meetings are interesting. They're massive news, and then they stay news. Like, this is the kind of thing that in a month now, hey, did you guys get something out of that team meeting? What was it? So it's something that kind of sticks around for a while, and and they'll probably reference it too. So I'm looking forward to next week being in Fort Myers. They have 2 difficult games. St. Bonaventure's pretty solid, and obviously Michigan State's very good. So we'll see if there's a connection from the value of the team meeting to those performances, and if they openly talk about it. That will be very interesting. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. TarHeal247.com. Head on over there and you get access to everything we do. If you love Carolina, you sign up. You can be a Tar Heel insider too. Also, make sure you subscribe to our channel here. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you share it with all your friends. And also hit that notification bell so you get updates every time we upload, which is often. In fact, I'll be popping a lot of stuff up from Fort Myers, pregame, all that kind of stuff. So you do not want to miss it if you love the Tar Heels. We appreciate y'all stopping by.